In the heart of Nairobi, Kenya, a young housemaid named Grace stumbles upon a wounded stranger in the forest, bleeding, unconscious, and hours from death. She doesn't know he's Prince Daniel, heir to one of Africa's wealthiest royal families. She only knows he needs help, but saving his life will thrust her into a dangerous world of jealousy, betrayal, and power. His fiancée, Victoria, will stop at nothing to destroy the girl who threatens her carefully planned future. As love blossoms between a prince and a maid, enemies close in from every side. This is a story of courage, love, and the choice between duty and the heart. Stay with us to discover if their love can survive the forces determined to tear them apart. If you're loving this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next incredible tale. Drop a comment below telling us what you think Grace should do next. Grace Mwangi lived in a modest house on the outskirts of Nairobi, Kenya. The walls were painted a fading blue, and the roof was made of corrugated metal that drummed loudly whenever the rains came. Inside, the furniture was sparse but spotless. A worn sofa in the living area and a small wooden table where meals were shared. Grace lived with her mother, Mama Grace, a woman whose face showed the marks of years spent working hard to provide for her daughter. Every morning began the same way. Grace would wake before dawn, sweep the dusty compound, walk to the community water point down the road, and prepare chai for her mother. Mama Grace had been unwell for several weeks. A persistent cough troubled her, and she tired easily. The local dispensary had given the medicine, but it was costly, and their savings were nearly gone. Grace worked as a housemaid for several families in the neighborhood, cleaning homes and washing clothes to earn what little money she could. But Grace had a dream that kept her going. She loved to clean and organize spaces, transforming cluttered rooms into peaceful havens. She dreamed of one day starting her own cleaning business, a small company that could employ other women from her community and provide steady income for her family. This particular morning, the house was quieter than usual. The food cupboard held only a small bag of maize flour and a few tea leaves. Grace looked at her sleeping mother and felt the familiar weight of worry settle on her shoulders. She needed to visit Mrs. Kamau, a kind neighbor who sometimes gave her extra work or leftover food in exchange for help around her shop. Before leaving, Grace decided to collect firewood from the forest behind their house. It would save them the little money they had for charcoal. The forest was dense with acacia trees and thick undergrowth. The morning air was cool and smelled of damp earth and wildflowers. Grace moved carefully along the narrow path, her plastic sandals making soft sounds on the dusty ground. She gathered dry branches, her mind wandering to thoughts of her mother's health and how she might afford the doctor's fees for better treatment. Suddenly, a loud sound shattered the peaceful morning. A vehicle skidding, the crunch of metal, and a man's sharp cry of pain. Grace froze, her heart pounding. Vehicles rarely came down this abandoned forest road. It was too rough and led nowhere important. Fear prickled her skin. She should run home and lock the door. Her mother had always warned her to avoid trouble. But another sound reached her ears, a soft, pained groan. Someone was hurt. Her instinct to help wrestled with her fear. Taking a deep breath, she dropped her bundle of firewood and crept toward the edge of the forest, peering through the thick bushes. On the dirt road below, partially hidden by tall grass, she saw something that made her gasp. A man lay motionless on the ground, face turned away. He wasn't moving. Blood stained his expensive-looking white shirt. Grace's mind raced. She should call for help, but she had no phone. The nearest police post was miles away. Every moment she hesitated could mean the difference between life and death for this stranger. Making her decision, she stepped out from the bushes and approached cautiously. As she got closer, she could see he was dressed in fine clothes, a tailored shirt and dark trousers. An expensive watch glinted on his wrist. He was clearly not from her neighborhood. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling. "Sir, can you hear me?" she whispered. A faint groan escaped his lips. He was alive. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by panic. What should she do? She couldn't carry him alone. She looked at his wounded arm. The bleeding was serious. He needed a doctor, but the nearest hospital was in the city, and she had no way to transport him. The only option was to take him to her house. It was a huge risk. If he was a criminal or in trouble with dangerous people, she could be bringing disaster to her doorstep. But looking at his pale face, she couldn't abandon him. With determination, she managed to get his arm around her shoulder. He was heavy, barely conscious. Step by painful step, she dragged him through the forest toward home, not knowing that she had just saved the life of a prince and changed her own life forever. Miles away in the exclusive Karen neighborhood of Nairobi, Prince Daniel Omondi felt suffocated. His family's estate was a mansion with pristine white walls, manicured gardens, and rooms so spacious they echoed. Staff in crisp uniforms moved silently through the corridors, attending to every need before it was even expressed. But Daniel felt trapped. His father, King Robert, was a respected businessman and traditional leader, but it was his mother, Queen Beatrice, who controlled the family's business empire with unwavering determination. Her latest project was Daniel's marriage. "Daniel, you must take this seriously," Queen Beatrice said that morning. They sat in the breakfast room, a space filled with imported furniture and crystal chandeliers. Daniel stared out the window at the perfectly trimmed hedges, ignoring the plate of food before him. "I'm serious, Mother," he replied without turning. "I'm seriously not interested in marrying Victoria." The Queen sighed with exasperation. "This isn't about your interests. This is about family, about business. The Mwendo family controls half the commercial real estate in East Africa. This marriage will create an alliance that benefits both families for generations." Daniel finally faced her. He was a handsome man with his father's gentle eyes, but his mother's stubborn jaw. "So, I'm just a business transaction? A pawn to be traded for a stronger portfolio?" "Don't be dramatic," the Queen said, tapping her manicured nails on the mahogany table. "Victoria is educated, beautiful, from excellent family. You could do far worse. She's also self-centered and cares only about status and money," Daniel muttered. He'd known Victoria since university, and he'd never liked her. She was calculating and cold. The thought of spending his life with her felt like a prison sentence. "I've arranged for you and Victoria to meet for lunch today," the Queen continued. "The wedding contracts need to be signed." That was the final straw. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "No," he said firmly. "I won't be going to lunch, and I won't be signing any contracts." Before his mother could protest, Daniel stormed out. He grabbed his car keys from the entrance table and walked into the bright morning sun. His driver, Peter, rushed to open the car door, but Daniel shook his head. "I'm driving myself today, Peter," he said, leaving no room for argument. He got into his black Range Rover and sped through the estate gates, leaving the mansion and its pressures behind. He had no destination in mind. He just drove, taking turns at random, trying to lose himself in Nairobi's chaotic streets. He didn't notice the white van that pulled out from a side street and began following him at a careful distance. Daniel drove until the modern buildings gave way to crowded neighborhoods, and the paved roads turned to red dirt. The SUV bounced along a rough track surrounded by thick forest. This was what he needed, a place where no one knew he was a prince. Then he saw it. A white van suddenly swerved from behind a cluster of trees, blocking the narrow road completely. Daniel slammed on the brakes. His vehicle skidded to a halt in a cloud of dust. For a moment, everything was still. Then 2 men jumped from the van. They wore rough clothes, and their faces were hard. One held something dark and metallic, a gun. Daniel's heart hammered. Carjackers. Kidnappers. He didn't have time to think. The men approached fast. "Drive. Go around them," Daniel shouted at Peter, who had insisted on accompanying him at the last minute. Peter tried to reverse, but the road was too narrow. The wheels spun uselessly in the soft dirt. The 2 men reached the driver's window. One of them, a large man with a thick beard, smashed the glass with his gun. Shards flew everywhere. "Get out," the man yelled. Peter tried to protect Daniel. He pushed his door open, attempting to fight back, but the second attacker was quicker. There was a sickening sound, and Peter slumped back, unconscious or worse. Daniel stared in horror. Without thinking, he shoved his own door open and ran, plunging into the dense forest. "Don't let him escape," he heard behind him. A sharp, burning pain exploded in his left shoulder. He cried out, stumbling. Looking down, he saw blood spreading across his white shirt. He'd been shot. Panic and adrenaline pushed him forward. He ran deeper into the forest, branches tearing at his clothes and face. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out. He tripped over a root and fell hard. The forest canopy spun above him. He tried to stand, but his body wouldn't respond. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. His last thought before losing consciousness was that he'd escaped one cage only to die in another. Grace stared at the unconscious man lying on the dusty road. Every instinct told her to run home, lock the door, and pretend she'd seen nothing. But she couldn't. Her mother had raised her to be kind, to help those in need. What if he dies here alone because I was too afraid, she thought. Taking a shaky breath, she stepped closer. The man was clearly wealthy. His clothes, though torn and bloodied, were expensive. His watch alone could probably feed her family for a year. He definitely wasn't from her neighborhood. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling. "Sir, can you hear me?" she whispered. He groaned softly. He was alive, barely. Relief washed over her, quickly followed by panic. What now? She was just a young woman with no medical training. She couldn't carry him alone. The nearest hospital was in the city, and she had no phone, no vehicle, no way to get him there. The only choice was to take him to her house. It was risky. If he was involved in criminal activity or dangerous people were after him, she could be putting herself and her mother in grave danger. But looking at his pale face and the blood seeping from his shoulder, she couldn't leave him to die. With all her strength, she managed to get his arm around her shoulder. He was heavy, his weight pressing down on her small frame. He was barely conscious, his feet dragging. Step by agonizing step, she hauled him through the forest, following the narrow path back to her home. Sweat poured down her face. Her muscles screamed in protest. But she kept going. When she finally stumbled into their small compound, Mama Grace was sitting by the door. Her mother's eyes widened in shock when she saw the stranger. "Grace, who is this? What have you done?" her mother cried, her voice thin with fear. "He was hurt, Mama," Grace panted, struggling under his weight. "I found him in the forest. We have to help him." Despite her fear, Mama Grace immediately went into action. She had learned traditional healing from her own mother. "Bring him inside. Put him on the sofa." Together, they managed to get him onto the old couch. He was unconscious now, his breathing shallow. Mama Grace examined his wound with worried eyes. "Fetch me the healing leaves from the garden," she instructed, "and clean water. Quickly." As Grace rushed to obey, her mother looked at the stranger more carefully. He was clearly a man of wealth and status. Men like him didn't just appear in their poor neighborhood. "This is dangerous, my daughter," Mama Grace whispered. "Very dangerous." "I know, Mama," Grace replied, returning with the leaves and a basin of water. "But we couldn't let him die." For the next hour, they worked together. Mama Grace crushed the healing leaves into a green paste and carefully applied it to the gunshot wound to stop the infection. Grace kept a cool cloth on his forehead to bring down his fever. They gave him small sips of water whenever he was conscious enough to swallow. "We must keep him hidden," Mama Grace said. "No one can know he's here." "Why, Mama?" "Because someone shot him. Those people might come looking for him. And if anyone sees a man like this in our house, there will be questions we cannot answer." Grace nodded, understanding the wisdom in her mother's words. They moved him to Grace's small bedroom, away from the windows. She would sleep on the sofa. That night, Grace lay awake, listening to the stranger's labored breathing from her room. Fear and doubt swirled in her mind. Who was he? Why had someone tried to kill him? Had she made a terrible mistake? But when she peeked in her room and saw his face, peaceful despite his pain, something in her heart stirred. This wasn't just duty or kindness. She felt a strange connection to this stranger, as if fate had brought him to her for a reason. "Please let him live," she whispered into the darkness. "Please let this not bring trouble to my mother. Outside, the night was quiet except for the usual sounds of the neighborhood. Distant music, a dog barking, the wind rustling through the trees. But somewhere in the shadows, the men who had shot the stranger were still searching, asking questions, showing his photo. And they were getting closer. Grace didn't know it yet, but saving this man's life had set in motion events that would change everything. Her simple life was about to become very complicated. The prince had entered the maid's world, and nothing would ever be the same. At the Omandi estate, chaos reigned. 3 days had passed since Prince Daniel had driven away, and there was still no word from him. King Robert sat in his study, his face etched with worry as he spoke on the phone with the police commissioner. The news was devastating. They found Daniel's Range Rover abandoned on a remote forest road. Peter, the loyal driver, was found dead inside, murdered. But of Prince Daniel, there was no trace. The police suspected kidnapping, but no ransom demand had come. It was as if the prince had vanished into thin air. Queen Beatrice paced the grand living room, her usual composure shattered. Her designer heels clicked against the marble floor with each agitated step. Her son was missing, possibly dead, and she felt helpless for the first time in her life. Princess Claire, Daniel's younger sister, sat quietly on a velvet sofa, her eyes red from crying. She was only 17 and adored her older brother. The heavy front doors opened, and Victoria entered with her mother, Mrs. Mwendo. They were dressed impeccably as always, but their expressions showed more annoyance than genuine concern. "Your Majesty," Mrs. Mwendo said, addressing the Queen with a polite nod. "We came as soon as we heard." "Any news?" "Nothing," Queen Beatrice replied, her voice trembling slightly. "They found the car, but not Daniel." Victoria sighed and sat down, crossing her legs elegantly. "Well, this is terrible timing. The board meeting for the merger is scheduled for next week. What should we tell the shareholders?" Princess Claire looked up, her eyes flashing with anger. "Is that all you care about? Your business deal? My brother is missing." "Of course I'm concerned, Claire," Victoria said dismissively. "But we must be practical. Millions of shillings are at stake." Queen Beatrice shot Victoria a look that could freeze fire. For the first time, she saw clearly the cold, calculating nature her son had always complained about. But she pushed the thought aside. Finding Daniel was all that mattered now. The king's security team fanned out across Nairobi, searching the area where the vehicle was found. The police promised to investigate thoroughly, but the trail was cold. The attackers had left no clues, and there were no witnesses. The hours stretched into days. Each one brought more fear and desperation. The Omandi family, despite all their wealth and influence, could do nothing but wait and pray. Late one night, Victoria stood on her balcony, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low and furious. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she hissed into the phone. "The plan was to frighten him into compliance, not make him disappear. What if he's dead?" She listened for a moment, her perfectly painted lips tightening into a thin line. "I don't care what excuses you have. The merger depends on this marriage. If the prince doesn't resurface soon, I need alternative options. Do you understand?" She ended the call and stared out into the darkness, her beautiful face hardening with determination. She hadn't spent years positioning herself for this marriage only to lose it now. Meanwhile, at Grace's small house, Daniel was slowly recovering. The fever had broken on the third day, and he was conscious more often. Mama Grace's traditional remedies were working. The wound was healing, and his strength was gradually returning. Grace spent every free moment caring for him. She would sit by his bedside when her mother rested, sometimes reading to him from old newspapers or simply watching him sleep. She was fascinated by him, his refined features, his gentle manner when he was awake, the way he murmured thanks in his feverish dreams. One afternoon, he opened his eyes and looked directly at her. For the first time, his gaze was clear and focused. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice weak but steady. "My house," Grace replied softly. "In Gong, outside Nairobi." He tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "How long have I been here?" "4 days." He looked around the small, simple room. The mud walls, the single wooden chair, the threadbare curtain serving as a door. It was a universe away from his palace. His eyes returned to Grace's face. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "Thank you." Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks. Anyone would have done the same. "No," he said, his voice firm despite its weakness. "Most people would have walked away. You risked your safety for a stranger." He noticed a small sketch pad on the table beside the bed. "What's that?" "Oh, nothing," Grace said quickly, trying to hide it. But Daniel's curiosity was piqued. "May I see?" Hesitantly, she handed it to him. Inside were drawings of cleaning tools arranged artistically, beautiful homes she'd organized, and sketches of her dream. A small cleaning company with her name on the sign. Daniel studied the drawings with genuine interest. "These are wonderful. You have real talent for design and organization." Grace had never received such a compliment. Her heart swelled with unexpected pride. In that moment, something shifted between them. A connection formed, fragile but real. The prince and the maid, from worlds impossibly far apart, had found common ground in a small room in Gong. But outside, danger was circling closer. And neither of them knew that their growing bond would soon be tested by forces neither could imagine. As days passed, Daniel grew stronger. He began spending time outside Grace's small bedroom, sitting in a modest living area while Mama Grace prepared simple meals. He insisted on calling himself Daniel and said he worked for a company in Nairobi, keeping his true identity hidden. Grace's life developed a new rhythm. She would wake early, do her housemaid work for various families in the neighborhood, then hurry home to check on Daniel. They began having long conversations in the afternoons when Mama Grace rested. Daniel was fascinated by Grace's world. She told him about growing up in Gong, about her dreams of starting a cleaning business, about the satisfaction she found in transforming cluttered spaces into organized, peaceful homes. "You talk about cleaning like an artist talks about painting," Daniel observed one afternoon. Grace smiled shyly. "I suppose it is an art. There's beauty in order, in knowing where everything belongs, in creating calm from chaos." Daniel found himself drawn to her simple wisdom and genuine nature. Unlike the people in his world who measured worth by wealth and status, Grace valued hard work, kindness, and integrity. She didn't know he was a prince, yet she treated him with respect and care. "What about you?" Grace asked one day. "You never talk about your family or your work." Daniel hesitated. He wanted to tell her the truth, but fear held him back. If she knew he was a prince, would she treat him differently? Worse, if word got out about his location, the men who tried to kill him might return. "It's complicated," he said finally. Grace didn't push, though curiosity shone in her eyes. One evening, Grace's best friend, Faith, came to visit unexpectedly. She was a cheerful young woman who worked at a salon in the nearby town. "Grace, I haven't seen you in days. What's been keeping you so busy?" Faith called out as she approached the house. Grace's heart leapt to her throat. She quickly stepped outside, blocking the doorway. "Faith, what a surprise. I've just been very busy with extra cleaning jobs." "You look tired," Faith said, studying her friend with concern. "Are you feeling all right?" Before Grace could respond, a soft cough came from inside the house. Faith's eyes widened. "Who's that?" My mother. She's been unwell," Grace said quickly, though Mama Grace's cough sounded nothing like that. Faith tried to peer around Grace. That didn't sound like Mama Grace. Grace's mind raced. Her secret was about to be exposed. Meanwhile, Daniel had heard voices and realized his presence was causing problems. He made a decision. Moving quietly to the doorway, he appeared behind Grace. "Hello," he said with a polite smile. "I'm Daniel, a friend of the family." Faith stared at him, her mouth falling open. He was clearly not from their neighborhood. Even wearing Grace's late father's old clothes, his refined bearing was obvious. "A friend," Faith repeated, her voice skeptical. "I was in an accident nearby," Daniel explained calmly. "Grace and her mother have been kind enough to help me recover." Faith looked from Daniel to Grace and back again, questions written all over her face. But seeing Grace's pleading expression, she simply nodded. "I see. Well, I hope you recover quickly." After Faith left, promising to keep the secret, Grace sank onto a chair, relieved but worried. "She'll keep quiet, but she's curious. And if she saw you, others might too." That night, Daniel made a decision. He couldn't keep hiding his identity from Grace. She deserved the truth. "Grace," he said the next morning when they were alone, "I need to tell you something important." She looked at him with those honest, trusting eyes, and his heart clenched. "My full name is Daniel Robert Omondi. I'm Prince Daniel, heir to the Omondi family." Grace's eyes widened. The spoon she was holding clattered to the floor. "A prince?" she whispered. "You're the missing prince? The one they've been searching for?" Daniel nodded. "The men who attacked me, I think they were hired by someone who wants to stop my wedding." "Your wedding?" Grace felt something twist in her chest. "An arranged marriage. To Victoria Mwendo. It's a business alliance I never wanted." At that moment, Faith burst through the door, her face flushed with excitement and fear. She held up her phone, showing a news article with Daniel's photo. "Grace, do you know who he really is? He's Prince Daniel. The whole country is looking for him." Mama Grace emerged from the bedroom, her face pale with shock. She looked at Daniel, then at her daughter, and sank slowly onto a chair. "We have been harboring the prince," she whispered. "We are in terrible danger." The small house that had been a sanctuary suddenly felt exposed and vulnerable. The outside world, with all its dangers and complications, had finally found them. Grace looked at Daniel. No, Prince Daniel, and realized that the connection she'd felt growing between them was impossible. Princes didn't fall in love with poor housemaids. That only happened in fairy tales. But the way he was looking at her in that moment suggested that maybe, just maybe, real life could be stranger than fiction. The revelation of Daniel's identity changed everything. The small house that had felt safe now seemed frighteningly exposed. Mama Grace was terrified, certain that either Daniel's enemies or the royal family's security would descend upon them at any moment. "We must get him back to his family," Mama Grace insisted, her voice shaking. "Every moment he stays here puts us all in danger." Daniel knew she was right. His presence was endangering these kind women who'd saved his life. But the thought of leaving, of never seeing Grace again, filled him with an unexpected ache. "I need to contact my family," he agreed. "But carefully. The people who attacked me are still out there." Faith, after her initial shock, had a plan. "My cousin works as a cleaner at a hotel near the royal estate. She can deliver a message to the security guards there without raising suspicion." Daniel wrote a brief note with a code phrase that only his most trusted bodyguard would recognize. Faith took the message and promised to return quickly. The wait was agonizing. Daniel paced the small yard while Grace watched him, her heart heavy. She'd grown accustomed to his presence, to their conversations, to the way he really listened when she talked about her dreams. "Grace," Daniel said, finally stopping his restless movement. He walked over to where she sat under a small tree. "I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, the afternoon sun casting shadows across his healing features. "This marriage to Victoria, I never wanted it. It's a business arrangement my mother organized. Victoria and I, we don't love each other. We never have. Grace's heart beat faster, but she kept her voice calm. It doesn't matter what you want. You're a prince. Your family needs you to marry someone suitable. Someone from your world. And what if I found someone I actually care about? He asked quietly. Someone who saw me as just a man, not a prince. Someone who risked her own safety to save a stranger. Grace stood abruptly, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Don't say such things. Don't give me hope for something impossible. Why is it impossible? Because I'm a housemaid. I live in a tiny house with a leaking roof. I clean other people's homes for money. Your mother would never accept me. Your world would never accept me. Daniel gently took her hands. I don't care about any of that. These past days with you have been the happiest of my life. For the first time, I felt like I could be myself. Daniel, I will return to my family because I must. But I promise you, Grace, this isn't the end. I will come back for you. Grace wanted to believe him, but fear and doubt clouded her heart. Princes didn't marry housemaids. That was reality, not a fairy tale. That evening, Faith returned with urgent news. The message has been delivered. A car will come for him tonight at midnight at the main road. The remaining hours passed too quickly. As darkness fell, they prepared for Daniel's departure. Mama Grace gave him a small pouch of healing herbs for the journey. Faith gave him a respectful nod, still somewhat starstruck by his presence. Grace walked with him to the edge of their compound as midnight approached. The night air was cool, filled with the sounds of crickets and distant music from a neighbor's radio. Grace, Daniel said, turning to face her. I meant what I said. I will come back for you. Your family will never allow it. Then I'll fight them. I'll fight everyone if I have to. He pulled her into an embrace, and Grace let herself melt into his arms for just a moment, memorizing the feeling, certain it would be the last time. Be safe, she whispered. You too. And Grace, don't give up on your dreams. Your cleaning business, everything you want, you deserve it all. He pulled back and looked in her eyes one more time. Then he turned and walked into the darkness toward the main road where an unmarked vehicle was waiting. Grace watched until she could no longer see his silhouette. Only then did she allow the tears to fall. Back at the house, Mama Grace held her daughter as she wept. My child, it's better this way. That world is not for people like us. But Grace wasn't crying because she thought it was hopeless. She was crying because, for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and valued by someone. And whether he was a prince or a pauper, that feeling had changed her forever. In the unmarked car, Daniel looked back at the small house one last time. He touched his healing shoulder and made a silent vow. He would return for Grace. No matter what obstacles stood in his way, he would keep his promise. The prince was going home, but he was leaving his heart behind in a small house in Gong. One afternoon, while organizing a client's cluttered storage room, she heard shouting outside. She emerged to find Faith running toward her, waving her phone frantically. Grace, Grace, you need to see this. Faith thrust her phone into Grace's hands. On the screen was a news article with a shocking headline. Prince Daniel refuses arranged marriage, declares love for mystery woman. Grace's hands trembled as she read. The article detailed how Prince Daniel had publicly announced at a royal dinner that he was in love with the woman who'd save his life. The entire country was buzzing with speculation about who this mystery woman could be. It's you? Faith whispered, her eyes wide. He actually meant it. He's fighting for you. Grace's heart soared with hope, then immediately plummeted with fear. If Daniel was publicly defying his family for her, there would be consequences. Powerful people would be angry. Victoria would be furious. This is dangerous, Mama Grace said when she heard the news. Her face was pale with worry. Very dangerous, my daughter. These wealthy people do not lose gracefully. She was right to be afraid, because at that very moment, in an exclusive restaurant in Nairobi, Victoria was making a phone call that would change everything. I need your help, she said into her phone, her voice cold and sharp as ice. There's a girl who's become a problem, a very serious problem. The man on the other end of the line was named Mr. Kamau, a businessman with connections to Nairobi's criminal underworld. He'd helped Victoria with problems before. What kind of problem? Mr. Kamau asked. The kind that needs to disappear, Victoria replied. Permanently. She sent him Grace's photo and address. Mr. Kamau studied the picture of the young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. This will be expensive, he said. Money is no object, Victoria replied. Just make sure it can't be traced back to me. Mr. Kamau smiled coldly. He knew exactly the men for this job. Two ruthless enforcers named Victor and Sam. They were the same men who'd bungled the attack on Prince Daniel, and they were eager to redeem themselves. Consider it done, Mr. Kamau said. Victoria ended the call and looked at her reflection in the restaurant's window. Her beautiful face was calm, showing no trace of the darkness within. She would not let some poor housemaid steal her future. If Daniel wouldn't marry her willingly, she would eliminate the obstacle and make him see reason. After all, what was one insignificant life compared to the empire she was meant to rule? The trap was being set, and Grace, innocent and unaware, was walking straight into it. Daniel's return to the Omondi estate created an explosion of emotion. Queen Beatrice wept openly, something she never did in public. King Robert embraced his son tightly, his eyes glistening with tears. Princess Claire refused to let go of her brother's arm. The palace erupted with activity. Doctors examined Daniel's wound, marveling at how well it had healed. Police officers questioned him extensively about the attack. Family members and business associates came to pay their respects and express their relief. Through it all, Victoria was constantly by his side, playing the part of the devoted fiancée. She brought him tea, adjusted his pillows, and told reporters how grateful she was for his safe return. But Daniel saw through her performance. He noticed the calculation in her eyes, the way she positioned herself for every photo, the tight smile that never reached her eyes. A week after his return, the family gathered for a formal dinner to celebrate his recovery. The dining hall glittered with crystal chandeliers and fine china. The queen, restored to her usual regal composure, steered the conversation toward the future. Now that you're recovered, Daniel, she said, her voice crisp, we can finally move forward with the wedding plans. Victoria and her family have been incredibly patient. Victoria, seated beside Daniel, placed her manicured hand on his arm. Of course, there's no rush. We just want Daniel fully healthy. Daniel knew this moment would come. He'd practiced what he would say, but his heart still pounded as he gently removed Victoria's hand from his arm. Mother, father, he began, his voice clear and steady. There's something I need to tell you. The table fell silent. All eyes turned to him. I cannot marry Victoria. Shocked gasps rippled around the table. Victoria's face went pale, then flushed with anger. The queen's expression hardened into stone. What is the meaning of this, Daniel? King Robert asked, his voice carefully controlled. I'm in love with someone else, Daniel continued. Her name is Grace. She's the woman who saved my life. He told them everything about the attack, about being wounded and lost, about how Grace and her mother had taken him in without knowing his identity. He spoke of Grace's kindness, her integrity, her dreams and ambitions. When he finished, the silence was deafening. Queen Beatrice was the first to speak. A housemaid, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. An unknown girl from the slums. You want to throw away a strategic alliance for some opportunist who saw her chance to trap a prince. She's not like that, Daniel insisted, his anger rising. She had no idea who I was. She risked her own safety to help a stranger. Daniel, think about what you're saying, King Robert said, his tone more gentle but equally firm. Our family has responsibilities. This marriage to Victoria has been planned for years. It will strengthen our business empire, secure our family's future. I won't sacrifice my happiness for a business deal, Daniel said, standing. I won't spend my life with someone I don't love. Victoria, who'd been sitting in shocked silence, finally erupted. So this is how you repay my loyalty, she cried, her voice shaking with fury. You choose some slum girl over me? She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. You'll regret this, Daniel. You'll regret choosing someone so beneath you. She stormed out of the dining room, her mother hurrying after her with a flurry of apologies to the royal family. Queen Beatrice turned to her son, her face a mask of cold fury. "You are forbidden from seeing this girl again. That is final." "Mother, no!" The queen's voice cracked like a whip. "You will not disgrace this family by pursuing some cleaning woman. Guards will be posted at every exit. You will not leave this estate until you come to your senses." Daniel looked at his father, hoping for support, but King Robert simply shook his head. "Your mother is right, son. This infatuation will pass. Give it time." Princess Claire reached for her brother's hand. Her eyes filled with sympathy, but she said nothing. Even she couldn't defy their mother in this. Daniel felt the walls closing in around him. He'd escaped one cage only to find himself trapped in another, this time by his own family. That night, he stood on his balcony, looking out toward the lights of Nairobi. Somewhere beyond those lights, in a small house in Gong, was Grace. He'd made her a promise, and he intended to keep it, no matter what. But first, he needed a plan. Meanwhile, in Gong, Grace's life had returned to its routine, but nothing felt the same. She went through the motions, cleaning houses, caring for her mother, helping neighbors, but her heart felt heavy. Faith visited often, bringing news she'd heard. They're saying Prince Daniel is back with his family. There are photos of him with that Victoria woman everywhere. Grace tried to ignore the stab of jealousy and pain. Of course, he was with Victoria. That was his world, not hers. "He'll forget about you," Faith said gently, not unkindly. "Men like him always do." But Grace remembered the look in Daniel's eyes when he'd promised to return. She remembered the warmth of his embrace, the sincerity in his voice. Part of her wanted to believe, even as logic told her it was hopeless. "I know," she said quietly. "I know he won't come back." But even as she spoke the words, she didn't fully believe them. 2 weeks passed, then 3. No word came from the palace. Grace threw herself into her work, trying to forget. She started sketching plans for her dream cleaning business, channeling her emotions into something productive. Victor and Sam received their instructions with cold efficiency. They studied Grace's photo and memorized the address in Gong. This time they would not fail. Quick and quiet, Mr. Kamau had told them. Take her to the old warehouse at the docks. Wait for further instructions. No mistakes. The two men drove their white van to Ngong the next morning. They parked near the busy market area and began asking careful questions, pretending to be relatives looking for a cousin. Have you seen this young woman? Victor asked a vendor, showing Grace's photo. Most people shook their heads, frightened by the men's rough appearance. But a young boy who'd seen Grace many times pointed them toward her house. She lives that way. Past the church, the boy said innocently. Victor and Sam exchanged satisfied looks. They drove to a hidden spot near Grace's compound and waited. They were patient men. Their chance would come. Meanwhile, Grace was trying to process everything that had happened. Daniel had publicly declared his feelings for her. The news had spread like wildfire. Some people in her community were excited, others were skeptical, and a few were outright hostile, accusing her of trying to rise above her station. You should be careful, Mrs. Kamau, one of her cleaning clients, warned. Rich people don't like when poor people threaten their plans. That Victoria woman won't take this lying down. Grace felt a chill, but pushed it aside. She had work to do. She couldn't hide in her house forever. That afternoon, she went to the market to buy vegetables. The sun was bright, the market crowded with people. She felt safe surrounded by familiar faces and cheerful vendors. She finished her shopping and started walking home, her basket full of tomatoes and sukuma wiki. The path was busy at first, filled with people returning from the market. But as she got closer to her house, the crowds thinned. The white van appeared suddenly, pulling up beside her on the dusty road. Before Grace could react, two large men jumped out. One clamped a rough hand over her mouth, stifling her scream. The other grabbed her arms with brutal strength. She struggled, kicking and twisting, trying to break free. Her basket fell to the ground, vegetables scattering across the dirt. But the men were too strong. They threw her into the back of the van. The door slammed shut, plunging her into dimness. She felt rough hands tying a cloth over her eyes and binding her wrists and ankles with rope. "Please," she tried to say, but her voice came out as a muffled sob. The van lurched forward, throwing her against the cold metal floor. Terror gripped her heart. Who were these men? What did they want? But deep down she knew this was because of Daniel. Because a prince had fallen in love with a housemaid, and powerful people wanted to keep them apart. At Grace's house, Mama Grace and Faith began to worry when evening came and Grace hadn't returned. It wasn't like her to be late without sending word. "Something's wrong," Mama Grace said, her voice trembling. "I can feel it." Faith tried to stay calm, but she was frightened too. She remembered the rough-looking men who'd been asking about Grace at the market. "I'll go look for her," Faith said, grabbing her phone. She hurried toward the market, asking everyone she met if they'd seen Grace. Near the path to Grace's house, she found the overturned basket, vegetables scattered everywhere. Her heart sank. Faith immediately called the police, then made another call to the contact number that had been circulating in the news for anyone with information about threats to Prince Daniel or his loved ones. At the palace, Daniel was in his room, frustrated and feeling helpless. His mother had posted guards at every exit. He was a prisoner in his own home. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Prince Daniel," a frightened female voice said. "My name is Faith. I'm Grace's best friend. Grace has been taken." Daniel's blood ran cold. "What? When?" "This afternoon. I found her basket on the road. There are witnesses who saw a white van take her. Prince Daniel, I think she's been kidnapped because of you." Daniel's mind raced. The white van, the same one from his own attack. This wasn't random. Someone wanted to hurt Grace to hurt him. "Do you have any idea where they might have taken her?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with controlled panic. "No, but the police are investigating. Prince Daniel, please, you have to save her. She's in danger because she saved you." Daniel's jaw tightened with determination. "I will find her. I promise you, I will find her." He ended the call and immediately phoned the police commissioner directly. "This is Prince Daniel. Grace Mwangi, the woman who saved my life, has been kidnapped. I want every available officer on this case. Now." The commissioner, recognizing the urgency in the prince's voice, mobilized his forces immediately. But Daniel wasn't going to sit and wait. He'd been a prisoner long enough. One way or another, he was leaving this palace tonight. He would find Grace, even if he had to turn all of Nairobi upside down. Even if he had to defy his family, the law, and every rule that bound him. Because the woman who'd saved his life was now in danger, and he would not fail her. The warehouse at the Nairobi docks was a decaying structure, its windows broken and walls covered in rust. Inside, in a circle of harsh light from a single bulb, Grace sat tied to a chair. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she held her chin high, refusing to show weakness. Victor and Sam paced around her, waiting for their final instructions from Mr. Kamau. Standing in the shadows, Watching with cold satisfaction was Victoria. She'd insisted on being present. She wanted to see the look on Grace's face when she realized her fairy tale was over. "You really thought you could have him, didn't you?" Victoria said, stepping into the light. Her designer heels clicked on the concrete floor. "You thought a prince would choose a housemaid over me." Grace stared at her, understanding flooding through her. "You did this. You're behind everything." "Daniel belongs to me," Victoria hissed. "This marriage has been planned for years. I won't let some nobody from the slums ruin my future." "He doesn't love you," Grace said quietly. "That's why you're so angry." Victoria's perfectly made-up face twisted with rage. She raised her hand to strike Grace, but Victor stepped forward. "Boss said not to mark her yet. Wait for final orders." Outside, Daniel had managed to escape the palace by bribing a young guard with a promise of promotion and a substantial bonus. He'd taken an unmarked car and raced toward the city, following the information the police had gathered. They'd traced the van's registration to Mr. Kamau's company. Security camera footage from various parts of Nairobi showed the van's route toward the docks. Every piece of evidence pointed to the old warehouse district. Daniel met the police team at a staging area 2 blocks from the warehouse. The police inspector, a serious man named Omondi, briefed him quickly. "We've confirmed there are at least 3 people inside with the hostage. We're preparing to move in." "I'm going with you," Daniel said firmly. "Your Highness, that's not advisable. These people are dangerous. That woman saved my life. I'm not sitting in a car while she's in danger." Inspector Omondi saw the determination in the prince's eyes and nodded. He handed Daniel a bulletproof vest. "Stay behind my officers. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." The team moved silently through the darkness surrounding the warehouse. They could see light coming from inside through the broken windows. Inspector Omondi's plan was simple. Create a diversion at the main entrance to draw out the kidnappers, while a second team entered from the back. On his signal, 2 police vehicles roared toward the front of the warehouse, sirens wailing and lights flashing. Inside, Victor and Sam jumped at the sudden noise. "Police!" Sam shouted. "How did they find us?" Both men grabbed their weapons and ran toward the front entrance, leaving Victoria alone with Grace. That was Daniel's moment. While the main team engaged Victor and Sam at the front, Daniel slipped through a broken window at the back with 2 officers. He moved quickly through the dark, cavernous space, guided by the single light where Grace was held. He saw Victoria first, standing over Grace with a look of pure malice. Rage surged through him. He rushed forward, startling Victoria. Before she could scream, he grabbed her arm, pulling her away from Grace. "It's over, Victoria." Victoria's eyes widened in shock, then fury. "Daniel, you chose her over everything." "I chose love over a business transaction," Daniel said coldly. "There's a difference." Police officers swarmed in, securing the area. At the front, Victor and Sam were quickly overpowered and arrested. Mr. Kamau was found hiding in an office, desperately trying to delete incriminating messages from his phone. Inspector Omondi took Victoria into custody as she screamed and protested. "You can't arrest me. Do you know who my family is? I'll have all your jobs." "You'll have a lot of time to think about that from a prison cell," the inspector replied calmly. "You're being charged with kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted homicide." Daniel rushed to Grace's side, his hands shaking as he untied the ropes binding her. "Grace, are you hurt? Did they harm you?" She fell into his arms, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. "I knew you'd come. I knew it." He held her tightly, his heart pounding with residual fear and overwhelming relief. "I'm so sorry. This happened because of me." "You saved me," she whispered, "just like I saved you." As police officers led Victoria away in handcuffs, she shot one final look of hatred at Daniel and Grace. "You'll both regret this," she screamed. "My family will destroy you." But her threats sounded hollow and desperate. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling, and everyone could see it. Inspector Omondi approached Daniel. "Your Highness, we'll need statements from both of you. But first, let's get you both checked by medics." Daniel helped Grace stand, keeping his arm protectively around her. As they walked out of the warehouse into the cool night air, Grace looked up at the stars and breathed deeply, grateful to be alive. "Come with me," Daniel said softly. "To the palace. You'll be safe there." Grace hesitated. "Your mother doesn't have a choice anymore. This ends tonight. All of it." They got into the police vehicle together, Daniel still holding Grace's hand tightly, unwilling to let her go. The ordeal was over, but the real battle, winning his family's acceptance, was just beginning. The drive to the Omondi estate was surreal for Grace. She sat close to Daniel in the back of the police vehicle, still trembling from her ordeal. The gates of the palace loomed before them, tall, imposing, and intimidating. As they entered, Grace saw the grandeur she'd only imagined. Manicured lawns, fountains lit with colored lights, and a massive mansion that looked more like a hotel than a home. King Robert and Queen Beatrice were waiting at the entrance, flanked by security and family members. The Queen's face was pale with worry that transformed to relief when she saw Daniel. "Thank God you're safe," she said, rushing forward to embrace him. "I'm fine, Mother," Daniel said. Then he gently pulled Grace forward. "But Grace was kidnapped because of me. Because I love her. And because Victoria couldn't accept that." The Queen's eyes fixed on Grace, taking in her simple clothes, her frightened expression, the rope marks still visible on her wrists. Inspector Omondi stepped forward and explained everything. Victoria's plot, Mr. Kamal's involvement, the evidence they'd gathered. As he spoke, the Queen's expression shifted from shock to horror, to something that might have been shame. "Victoria did this?" King Robert said, his voice heavy with disbelief. "The woman we chose for our son? She hired criminals to kidnap and potentially murder Grace," the inspector confirmed. "She's been charged accordingly. We've also discovered she was involved in the original attack on Prince Daniel. She wanted to frighten him into compliance with the marriage." Queen Beatrice sank into a chair, her regal composure cracking. I brought this danger to our family. I pushed so hard for this marriage." Princess Claire came forward and took Grace's hands. "Thank you for saving my brother," she said warmly. "Twice now." King Robert approached Grace, studying her carefully. "Young woman, you've shown extraordinary courage. You saved my son when he was dying, asking nothing in return. And you've suffered greatly because of our family's conflicts." He turned to his wife. "Beatrice, we've been fools. We've been so focused on business alliances and social position that we nearly lost our son and caused an innocent woman to be harmed." The Queen looked at Grace for a long moment. She saw not a scheming opportunist, but a young woman with honest eyes and a kind heart. She saw the way her son looked at her, with genuine love and respect. "I was wrong," Queen Beatrice said quietly, her voice breaking. "I was so wrong about everything." She stood and walked to Grace, taking her hands. "Can you forgive a foolish old woman who nearly destroyed her son's happiness?" Grace, overwhelmed, nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Please," the Queen said with a small smile. "Call me Beatrice. Or if you're willing, call me Mother." Tears streamed down Grace's face. Daniel pulled her close, his own eyes wet with emotion. "There will be a wedding in this palace," King Robert declared. "But it will be the wedding our son truly wants." The royal wedding 3 months later was indeed the grandest event Nairobi had seen in years. But Grace had insisted on keeping it personal and meaningful. The ceremony took place in the palace gardens under a canopy of white roses. Grace wore a stunning gown designed by a Kenyan designer, and her hair was adorned with a delicate diamond tiara, a gift from Queen Beatrice. In the front row sat Mama Grace, healthy and glowing with pride and faith, who couldn't stop crying happy tears. Grace had insisted her community from Gong be invited, and they filled half the seats, market vendors, neighbors, and the family she'd worked for. As Grace walked down the aisle, she saw Daniel waiting for her, his face radiant with joy. This was real. This was happening. They exchanged vows in front of the king, the queen, and hundreds of guests. When Daniel kissed his bride, cheers erupted from every corner of the garden. In the months that followed, Grace didn't just become a princess, she became a force for change. With the royal family's support, she established the Grace Foundation, providing business training and microloans to domestic workers across Kenya who wanted to start their own enterprises. Her first major project was launching Grace's Professional Services, a cooperative of professional cleaners and home organizers who were paid fair wages and treated with dignity. It became wildly successful, expanding to 5 cities within 2 years. She never forgot where she came from. She and Daniel built a beautiful new home for Mama Grace in Gong, and they ensured the entire community had access to clean water, health care, and education opportunities. Grace found her place not just as Daniel's wife, but as a beloved member of the royal family and an inspiration to ordinary Kenyans. She proved that kindness, courage, and integrity mattered more than birthright. Victoria was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Mr. Kamau and his associates received similar sentences. The Cole family's business empire crumbled under the scandal. Daniel and Grace ruled side by side with wisdom and compassion. Their love story became legendary, not because it was a fairy tale, but because it was real. The housemaid who'd once cleaned other people's homes now lived in a palace. But more importantly, she'd used her position to lift others up, to create opportunities, to prove that one person's kindness could change the world. And every night, as Grace looked out over the lights of Nairobi from her balcony, Daniel by her side, she remembered that scared girl in the forest who'd chosen to help a stranger. That choice had led her here, to a life more beautiful than any dream she'd ever dared to imagine. The end. Thank you so much for joining us on Grace and Daniel's incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite moment from this story. Want to support us even more? Click the join button below to become a channel member and get exclusive perks. Your support helps us create more heartwarming content like this. Share this video with someone who loves inspiring love stories. And remember, kindness can change your life in ways you never imagined. See you in our next story. God bless you all. Folded hands, red heart, ***.